While the shutdown remains locked up, the Epstein files remain locked down, and Republicans spin wildly as momentum builds for the No Kings protest, I get to turn to one of my favorite themes, and that is shining a light on Donald Trump's racism. That thing he rode into office on and continues to inspire others to let their bigoted flags fly high. That thing that everyone needs to be reminded of from time to time. And coming up next, I have an insider exposing the rotten core of racism that Trump is at the center of, and J.D. Vance's failure to get away with a similar level of normalization of white nationalism. To begin with, we have Vance to thank for the resurfacing of Trump's racism because he not only failed to denounce some high-profile bigotry within the Republican Party, but he provided some very friendly cover. And to bring you up to speed on that still developing story, I've curated analysis from Senator Brian Schatz, who appeared with Tommy Vidor on the Pod Save America podcast, and Jessica Yellen, former chief White House correspondent for CNN. Please have a look at their respective and very insightful breakdowns, and then I'll share the connection to Trump as an insider perfectly exposes him for what he is and Vance for what he is not.
Focusing on what kids are saying in a group chat, grow up. Focus on the real issues.
Yes, that's Vice President J.D. Vance shrugging off vile, hateful texts shared by some young Republicans in a group chat. Those jokes celebrated racism, Hitler, and rape, plus there were slurs that were all kinds of offensive. Several of those not-so-young Republicans have already lost their jobs, and a bunch of elected officials have condemned the texts. But sources on the right are barely covering the story. And what lots of those sources won't tell you is that the jokes in those texts include lines like, "I love Hitler," and "going to the gas chamber." And the kids Vance talks about, well, lots of them are in their late 20s and mid-30s.
Suffice to say, the comments were extremely racist, anti-Semitic, often violent, misogynistic. Vance tweeted an image of a text from Virginia Attorney General candidate Jay Jones, where Jones advocated for political violence. And then JD included text from himself that said, "This is far worse than anything said in a college group chat, and the guy who said it could become the AG of Virginia. I refuse to join the pearl clutching when powerful people call for political violence." But I'm curious what you think the impact is of the vice president just refusing to say, yeah, you know what, those comments were out of line.
Why not both, right? Why not condemn political violence or violent talk on both sides? I do think JD is making maybe he has no choice here, but he's making a tactical error. I think Trump is the only politician that can get away with this crazy shit.
Trump is the only politician who can get away with this shit. And I would add, not only get away, but thrive. Without the swath of the MAGA base who have received and embraced his dark messages, he would not be president today. And here's a former Homeland Security official who served under him, Miles Taylor, to speak of that rotting core that Trump and Vance represent.
Miles, I'll start with you as someone who, came up, I think, in Republican and conservative circles, has been a staff member. Have something changed here?
I'll tell you this. When I came up in the GOP and George W. Bush was president and I worked in that administration, this would not have been tolerated. When I was working for Bush, when I was working for Cheney, when John McCain was my mentor, when John Boehner was Speaker of the House, when Paul Ryan was Speaker of the House, these types of folks, love or hate them, would not have tolerated this sort of widespread culture among their acolytes. This is not the Republican Party they wanted to raise. But make no mistake, Chris, this stuff existed on the fringes, but now it's not the fringes anymore. It's the core. It's the rotting core of the party. And there's two things you can do, though, in response to this news. One is, of course, you can hold the mirror up to the people who wrote these messages. That's fair. That's fine. And some of them are being held accountable. But I think more significantly, we don't just look at these young Republicans. We hold the mirror up to the people who are their mentors. That's why it wouldn't have been tolerated when I came up in the Republican Party, because I had mentors who would have policed it. My butt would have been kicked out of the door. I wouldn't have had jobs in those places. But their mentors are condoning it. And it goes all the way to the top. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And I would go as far as to say this, Chris, these guys, like J.D. Vance, are grooming young men in the Republican Party. They are grooming them for cruelty. They are raising these weak little loser incels to go attack people who are weaker, to go attack people because of their race, to go attack people because of their religion. That type of bullying displays total weakness, but that's now become the core culture in the Republican Party that I once was in.
Yeah, the distinction you make there, I think, Jennifer, that's an interesting one. So you can imagine that people 10 years ago might have had exchanges like this, although I do think some of the I love Hitler stuff is a particular kind of weird Nazi-aligned subculture that's really flourished. But I agree with Miles that you wouldn't have had big Republicans defending it, right? Paul Ryan, they would have been like, this is terrible. And you even saw that from some. To me, Vance is really the fulcrum here. For him to come out and be do this sort of gaslighting and use the term young boy. It's I have a young boy. Yeah. He's 11 years old.
Yeah.
He's not maybe he has no choice here, but he's making a tactical error. I think Trump is the only politician that can get away with this crazy shit.
How crazy is it that we have to admit that a president in the year 2025 can get away with crazy racist shit, and we have a vice president who is trying to emulate him? As the heir apparent, Vance now has to represent the rotting core of the party and speak to the voters who are letting their racist flags fly high and can swing elections. Now, I don't think all Republicans qualify as full-blown bigots, but those who don't say something, which is nearly every Republican, deserve whatever scrutiny they receive. The spectrum of racism begins with turning a blind eye towards it, and doing so puts them in a socially impossible position. They cannot say, I see the racism, but I support him anyway, without implicating themselves. Donald Trump somehow got away with racism. Perhaps the fabric of societal evolution ripped open and he passed through the hole. But he's a generational figure with a bizarre power that we may never understand, and J.D. Vance is no Donald Trump. And after Trump is gone, that gap is going to close, and he will be the fall guy for the Republican Party that is rotten to the core.